It's lights out on the pit wall. Welcome to our Fantasy Formula One podcast. I'm your host, Jeanmark, and joining me this evening is my bro, Dominick, my friend, Paola, and my father, Dr. David Kessler. Boy, oh boy, what a race. Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Let's kick it over to our race results. Big movers and shakers this race. We had Leclerc on pole, but that Ferrari just could not stay there, and so he dropped down the order. Then Verstappen leading at his big crash. He tumbled down the order. Then at the restart of the race, Hamilton, he had a failure. His mistake caused him to tumble down the order. And then the man, the now legend, Perez from Q7, finishing in P1, getting 51 huge points. So, bro, how did you feel about Perez's epic performance?
I was very pleased with the way he drove. It is got to be nerve-wracking to have Hamilton behind you for a good portion of the race. And he handled it really well. And he was actually able to get a little bit of separation, get out of the DRS zone so that he could just drive the way he needs to. After Verstappen crashed out, this was his chance to get that win. With only 2 laps to go, he got off the blocks really well and he took it home. And it was really exciting to watch.
Perez is the first driver in the turbo hybrid era to win for 2 different teams, so hats off to Perez. Another man who continued with his history, Vettel, has never finished lower than 4th place at this race, and he was able to put it on the podium, which means that Perez and Vettel, who came into this race tied with Bottas and Hamilton for having 2 appearances on the podium, now there is a new tie for 3 podium appearances, Perez and Vettel. Dad, how did you feel with seeing Vettel's Q11 finishing 2nd on the podium?
I thought it was pretty amazing. I really liked Vettel, and then he didn't do so well in Ferrari. I'm really excited what he did in Aston Martin this time, and hopefully he'll be able to continue it.
I have to wonder if this feels especially good for Vettel. He was able to get past Leclerc. He's likely gotten a higher position than Leclerc will for the rest of the year, and being able to beat out a past teammate must feel good for him, especially since there was a lot of doubt for him coming into the season.
True, he had a few difficult races, but over the last 2 races, the Aston Martin strategy has been to overcut everybody. Just go as long as possible, manage your tires, and gain those positions. And even Vettel led the race for a few laps, and I was like, they're probably going to keep him out here as long as possible, so he feels like he's winning. Back to the Aston Martin strategy in Monaco, they gained 8 positions, 3 for Vettel, 5 for Stroll. Through their pit strategy in Baku, Vettel gained 9 positions. His teammate from last season, Leclerc in the Ferrari, Paola, how did you feel about Leclerc putting on pole and then not being able to have the race pace?
We got a solid performance from both Ferrari drivers. You have to remember that Mercedes and Red Bull both have better pace on those long straights, and Leclerc got his P1 by taking advantage of that slipstream during quali. I'm not really surprised that he lost a couple of positions. I think he did a good job holding that 4th place.
As soon as the race started, I remember texting out to the group, how many laps do you think it'll take until Hamilton passes Leclerc? Like, I love Leclerc, but Ferrari struggles on the straight. It was pretty much inevitable. And Dad, what was it you suggested there?
I would put 5 laps, but I was going to put 3, but I thought that was too bold. But apparently I wasn't.
He didn't even have DRS. He just scooted right behind that Ferrari, slipstream him, and Hamilton was in the lead.
Perhaps he Scuderia'd around the Ferrari? Eh? I'll show myself out now.
Relative to last year, I think their power unit's a lot better and that they have done some work to improve that. Don't think any of us are surprised that he didn't keep that P1 positions.
That's something to keep in mind is half of the race weekend is qualifying. Now, in Fantasy Formula 1, you get points based off of qualifying and then the race. People wanting to know why I was putting such a huge emphasis on Perez. Perez statistically does not have good quality pace, not like Leclerc, Hamilton, or Verstappen, but Perez does have really good race pace. Like we said, Leclerc, he got a decent amount of points for getting on pole, but it was very hard for his team package to keep him up front. He almost clawed it all the way back to the podium, though. That restart, he passed Gasly, and then Gasly passed him back.
That was pretty fun watching that restart and seeing that between Gasly and Leclerc. That was fun.
It was like a 2-lap sprint race. Some people might wonder, how in the world did Verstappen get away with 9 points when he clearly crashed out? There's a difference between DNF or did not finish and not counted. You'll will see that Verstappen is counted in 18th place because he finished at least 90% of the laps. The reason why he gets 9 points, even though he lost most of them from dropping places, is he got 3 points for beating his teammate in qualifying. He finished the race with 1 point, and then he got fastest lap, which is 5 points. I know that in championship points, you don't get anything unless you're in the top 10, but for fantasy, you get the fastest lap no matter where you are, you get 5 points. And those added together, getting him the 9 points that he'd need so that he didn't end up like Stroll or Ocon with massive negative points.
A lot of people are talking about Schumacher versus Russell, but look at these fantasy points. You could even almost say Mazepin versus Russell.
When Mazepin is getting more points than Hamilton, what a world we live in.
When Mazepin has to unlap and still gets more points than the two Williams put together.
Wow. Let's get the steam off this boiling water pot we're throwing everywhere. Cool little fact. This year has seen 6 different constructors on the podium in the first 6 races. We are having an amazing thing where last year you had a tight midfield battle, but Mercedes was just way too far out in front of everybody because of their power unit. The power units have come closer this year. So now when the leaders have mistakes, the midfield are so close, take advantage and get on the podium. And so we're having some really cool, exciting racing. Let's go over to our dynamic pricing report. The more that Verstappen leads races and wins, he's going to continue to go up in value. And Hamilton, due to the huge amount that he costs, is going to continue to decrease in value. Shout out to Perez. He got his quali streak. That's plus 5 points. And Gasly got his race streak, which is a plus 10 points. Feel really bad for Ocon. He wasn't even really able to start the race, and he lost all the streaks. He was 3 for a quali streak and 4 for race streak, and now all the way back from the beginning. Speaking of losing streaks, with Verstappen and Hamilton losing their streaks, that means that the grand narrative of potentially mega driving either of them at Silverstone is now defunct. Dad, how do you feel now that you were able to use your mega driver last race at Monaco?
I was pretty happy at the time that I scored the 180 points, but now I feel even better because I don't think that I'll be able to mega drive him with a sprint and a race qualifying all at the same time in the future.
Before we get into our race reactions, we want to hear from you guys. Joining us on Twitter, you get to be a part of the discussion. I love putting out little polls. They're the coolest thing. Here's our first poll. There were 4 drivers tied with 2 podium appearances at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Who breaks the tie of this race? It was mainly between Hamilton and Perez. But shout out to those 4.5% who said Vettel, because who knew Perez and Vettel would keep the tie alive? So Paola, seeing that smile, what are your thoughts, your reactions to the Vettel-Perez continuing the tie forward?
Kind of throwing me off, and I think it might be throwing a lot of people who play F1 Fantasy off because we did not expect Aston Martin to be doing this well. It makes me think a lot more about Vettel's value. It makes me think a lot more about who to put as my turbo driver. I didn't have Perez up on my list. As turbo driver, I've been usually doing Norris or Charles, giving me a lot to think about.
That was the main takeaway I had for this race. Last race, I went all in on Leclerc, got burned. If he had not had that, did not start, he would have had buco points. But this race, I was like, go all in on Perez, and this time it paid out. Our second Twitter poll, tire management. This was after free practice 1 and 2. Tire management making the difference. Which do you think is more likely? Perez wins the race or Hamilton is off the podium? And because of the performance of the Mercedes at the time, 65.4% said Hamilton off the podium. It's interesting. They had a particular wing package for the downforce the first practice. It didn't work. Then they switched to another option. The second practice did not work. So going into free practice 3, Hamilton said, I'll pick the wing that I like. Bottas picks the wing he likes. And Hamilton ended up having the better option because he was really kicking it in free practice 3. But isn't it crazy that both of these things happened in the race? Perez got the podium and Hamilton went off the podium. What a madness.
100% correct. Way to go.
No matter which one you picked, you were right.
I can't blame anybody for being surprised that Hamilton wouldn't make it on the podium. Statistically speaking, even if the Red Bulls were both faster, which they were, there's only 2 Red Bulls. Chances are he'd still be third, right?
On to our third poll. An hour before the race, I believe. Who wins? Leclerc from P1, Hamilton from P2, Verstappen from P3, or surprise, somebody from P4 to P20. Tied. 42.9% said Verstappen from P3, and they were almost right until the last couple laps. And then 42.9% said surprise, P4 through P20, and you guys were not correct until the last 4 laps, the restart. I want to give a shout out. One said, be prepared for a big surprise. a Mexican surprise. Go Checo. And I was so happy that he was able to say, let's go Checo. Good out to you, Juan, because that was a very well-aging tweet. Total epicness. We got to see perhaps the craziest restart because of those unforeseen problems.
But Guy, if you have the ability to see the future, let me know, man. I could use that, please. Yeah, exactly. See, exactly. Come on, man. Let me know some stuff.
And on to our last tweet. I had to retweet it. It was just golden. This is from Mercedes. From happiness to sadness in seconds. That is Toto Wolff's reaction to the race start where Hamilton just pulled up alongside. He had a really good start compared to Perez and then lost it all. Man, that's how many people felt, especially if you were wanting Hamilton to get that race start victory.
From the angle that they showed from where we were watching, it was very far away. It was kind of hard to see who it was. I actually almost thought it was Vettel. And I'm like, no, not Vettel. Because very similar, almost looking car from far away.
Like they pulled up really to that wide
it was really
angle.
far up. I was like, no, not Vettel. And it wasn't Vettel. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Sly Vettel. Now to get to our race reactions. Let's start off with Norris having a slow start. He had to claw his way back, but he was able to fend off Bottas for actually a surprising number of laps. Bottas never was able to pass him. Paola, how did you feel with Norris's performance over the course of the race?
I think you should be pretty happy about it. So this is one of the first times that we've seen him get red flag mistake. But on top of that, at the beginning of the race, with a really cautious start, I think he got his head back on. He passed Tsunoda. And, well, he didn't pass Hamilton. Hamilton went off the rails, but to get back up to that P5 position. Really, really good learning opportunity for him.
After the race, Norris commented if he hadn't had that 3-place grid penalty, he would have been in the same spot Perez was at the beginning of the race, and he could have been fighting for the podium or the win. He has to be happy he was able to claw it back to 5th. Not only did Norris have some difficulties, Bottas and Sainz both had some issues getting off the line, getting passed by a few different individuals. Bro, how did you feel with Sainz' lockup and trying to claw back in the race?
It was very unfortunate to watch. The Ferraris were looking pretty good early on. When you lock up and you go off track, you're losing a lot of time. As you saw, he lost lots of places. Actually kind of amazing that he was able to get some of that back.
Speaking of losing time, crucial moment in the race was the first round of pit stops, in which Hamilton lost precious seconds having to wait for Gasly, who was coming down the pit straight. That opened up the window then for Verstappen to get ahead of him, but then Perez was going to be able to get ahead of both of them. He had a really stellar 2 in laps and then had a 4.3 second pit stop. Came out behind Verstappen, but right just ahead of Hamilton. Bro, do you feel that was something by the team to hold him back, or was it just purely he was fortunate to get out when he did, even though he had a really push lap?
This is what I would categorize as baseless conjecture. How about I shoot this off to somebody else? Paola, you got any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Perez, stellar. How many people can you put up there outside of Leclerc back when he was having to hold off Hamilton at Spa and Monza in 2019? For you to be able to hold off Hamilton for lap after lap after lap, and he was having DRS, and he was trying to pass you, hats off to Perez and being able to stay cool in Baku.
I was just happy that Perez is seeming to be getting more command of his car, because earlier in the year, I thought he's going to be that wingman for Verstappen, and it didn't seem to happen, but maybe it will now. He seems to be catching on.
I'm a bit worried about Hamilton. The team as a whole seems really unsettled after the last 2 races, and it always comes out like we'll come back stronger, we'll recoup, we'll learn from our mistakes. He doesn't seem to have the same kind of confidence that he did at the beginning of the season. I don't think that he's used to having somebody like Verstappen and now Perez, basically somebody to give him a fight right there with him from beginning to end. I think he's in a really uncomfortable position.
I think Hamilton was expecting Bottas to be a better wingman, and Bottas also hasn't been able to help stave off the Red Bulls. I think it is unsettling to Hamilton. It makes you wonder how much longer Bottas may be in that position.
I don't think they're going to pull a Red Bull and switch him out halfway through the season unless Mercedes is really far behind and they start trying to figure out what they can do to salvage this season. It's a tricky situation for Hamilton. Just think about this. he really does not have much experience having to fight another team at Mercedes. So Verstappen and Perez, if he continues to improve, they're going to put a stranglehold on Mercedes. And then Hamilton's probably more likely to make mistakes as he's going to try to claw back. Same thing happened with Vettel. Vettel last was leading the championship in 2018, I believe, the German Grand Prix. He was in first place. A little patch of water got on the track. He crashed out. And ever since then, he could not have the same performance at Ferrari. And Hamilton just destroyed him the second half of that season. But up until that race, Hamilton, when he did interviews, you could tell he was getting really stressed out and unsettled that the Ferrari was beating him. And so we might see similar things happen now that the Red Bull is being able to outperform him race by race.
And the danger with that is that all it takes, when you have one person carrying the team, in this case, Lewis, all it takes is one accident, one big mistake on his end to end up 30 plus points down on the Constructors' Championship.
Max Verstappen still holds a 4-point lead over Hamilton. Perez has now gone up to third place. Bro, how do you feel about being in third place in the championship with only 69 points?
Beyond Hamilton and Verstappen, I don't want to say that all the other drivers are irrelevant. Third place is not even close to second place. When Verstappen tire blew out, I'm pretty sure the only person he was worried about was Hamilton. And Hamilton was probably thinking about Verstappen when that race restarted, and he was trying to make up as much ground as humanly possible. There's just such a huge difference in points.
A huge, huge gap. It's crazy to think that only one driver of both of those teams survived this race. 25 additional points for Red Bull to increase their gap over Mercedes. And this is why I think Imola is so important. Hamilton could have DNF'd and he was able to fight back and bring it back to second place. Imagine if he had actually broken his wing or got stuck in the gravel. He would be in such a big hole right now, and then he would be even beating himself even more to have that bad lockup. Okay, he locked up and he got 0 points, but he's still only 4 points behind Verstappen. Imagine if he did that lockup and he's still 20-something points behind Verstappen. He'd be really upset.
It really goes to show what kind of power your team has when both of your drivers are driving well and how that can affect other teams' tire strategy and pit strategy. It's not so simple when you have two drivers to contend with versus one. Right now, it looks like the Red Bulls are the ones on top of it, getting the drivers close to each other, making it a little bit harder for Mercedes, whereas Bottas is unfortunately a little bit further back. And earlier, remember, they were talking about how Perez was the one that was really far back. They're like, oh, well, we need Perez to step up so that he can give him help. And now it's reverse. Bottas right now is the one struggling. Now we're getting to see Perez really step up, and it's making things a little bit more difficult for Mercedes.
Okay, bro, what was your thoughts about Verstappen crashing out from the front?
Really came out of nowhere. The cameras was just showing some cars driving by, and then all of a sudden I see this blue car spinning and bam, straight to the wall. And they're like, Verstappen. I was like, no, come on, man, not Verstappen. You see him get out of the car. He is upset. He is on a straight. There is no way this is his fault, and he knows that. He gets out of the car. He kicks that tire because he knows which one it is, and he walks off very dejected, very upset. You could tell it was bad.
It was really bad because he had a similar thing that Stroll had. It was a little later on the straight, very similar thing that happened. And it's really hard when you're just driving straight and your car gives way. It's not like he made a mistake braking and he locked up his brakes or anything. He just was driving and boom, out of nowhere, his car, what we call a tank slapper. It's where you hit the wall and your car swings around and the rear hits the same wall. So your neck gets snapped around. That's what the Hans device, which straps their head back to the seat, is really important, because if you're hitting a concrete barrier at like 200 miles per hour, you could really get bad injuries from having your neck slapped around like that. Paola, I know some people are going to say that these are tires that just blew out of nowhere. It's all Pirelli's fault, but I believe you've got something that's really important for us to keep in mind. What's your perspective?
I just don't think we have enough information to know what happened yet. We see this all the time, like in politics and in sports, that just because something happens more than once, that they're related and that there is one single cause for it. One accident could have been because of one issue and the other because of a different issue. We don't know. So I don't think it's wise for us to jump to conclusions. This is one of the fastest races this season so far. Maybe had to do with the way that they were driving the car. We just don't know. I think to throw Pirelli under the bus right away is a mistake. In the same way that when Charles crashed in quali for Monaco and they had to do additional research to figure out what really went on, I think we should take a moment to pause and consider all the options.
We could definitely give them a break, or we could all just ride the hype train. Choo-choo!
It is always important to remember correlation does not mean causation. Now, something that's really cool that we're doing as a Pitwall is that we have a text message group where we're able to share our live race reactions. So amazing. Granted, some of us were very tired. It was a really early race in the morning, but I just had to record my reaction because I wanted to see Verstappen and Hamilton have a championship fight, and Verstappen just out of no fault of his own blows up on the straight. It seems like Hamilton's just going to get lucky again, and then the restart happened, and boy, oh boy, let us take a look at how I was feeling in the moment when Hamilton had his lockup.
Yes, Arriba! Yes! 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 The championship is still on! Yes! Yes! Yes!
It might be cringy, it might be memey, whatever you want to do with it, but that's how I felt. I was down on my knees. I was like, this is what I needed. Championship is back on. We have to keep parity. So how did you guys feel with the Hamilton lockup and the excitement it added to this, what I'm going to call now one of the most iconic races that you can put right up there in Formula One history?
Well, I was excited too. Not only to hear your excitement, Hamilton to me doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. I hate when people make mistakes. I don't like to rejoice in mistakes, but I sure like that the championship wouldn't come down to Verstappen's tire and Hamilton just running away with it.
When they red flagged the race, they had discussed briefly the idea of just ending the race. There was basically only 2 laps left after they did the warm-up round. Verstappen was given a unfortunate hand, and that was not his fault. If they had just ended the race, he would get the points, and Hamilton would have gotten his points, but he would have been a little bit further ahead. But when I saw Hamilton slide off the track, I was surprised, first of all, because I'm like, whoa, Hamilton never does that. I was looking at the live points thing. Verstappen was still ahead now. I was like, okay, all right, maybe we will get to see some Red Bull shine a little bit longer. And also wasn't Vettel, so I was excited.
I was super, super happy. I've only been watching F1 for a couple of years, so I never got to see Vettel at his prime live. So to see him do really well in a race was really exciting for me. And to see all these unexpected kind of events, but with no one getting seriously injured. That's one of the reasons why I got into the sport, because there's variables that can change at any given moment. It gave like a really exciting fight between Charles and Gasly on those last 2 laps as well, which was really fun to see. Wildest race, best race so far this season.
And that is what I think is amazing about sports. It's live, it's unpredictable. And as you point out, Paola, because Formula One has gotten to the point where it can also be safe, what we saw with them with the tire blowout, to be able to just walk out and kick the tire and be upset. No bruises, no broken bones. Enough of my crazy, amazing reaction. Let's kick it over to our heroes and zeros. Bro, let's begin with your hero.
People were hyped for Tsunoda at the beginning of the year. Then they were like, Tsunoda, he's not doing all that great. Bam. Tsunoda says, you know what? Let me qualify 8th. Let me finish the race in 7th. And let me have the best race I've had all season. And I'm all down for that. And hats off to you, Tsunoda, for having a good race with no issues.
To piggyback off of that, the team figured the best way to help show support to him was to move him closer to the factory. So they moved Tsunoda to Italy between last race and this race. Now he's really close to the factory. He's able to connect. You've got an Italian team and you've got a Japanese driver. So how do you help them feel supported? I think that's why Gasly has been able to do so well at AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri supports their drivers really well. If this is the start to get him rising towards a peak, imagine if he starts qualifying as high as Gasly has been doing, around the 5th, 6th, 7th position. They're going to start taking away points from McLaren and Ferrari, and then we're going to get an interesting midfield fight. And Dad, so who's your hero?
It's got to be Perez. He saved my fantasy team. I was relying on Verstappen to make me a lot of points. Perez had to pick it up. Came all the way from 6th place to 1st place. It was amazing.
So Paola, who's your hero?
For me, it was Gasly. He showed some really smart, focused driving. I heard over the radio, like about mid-race, that he was having some engine issues, but that didn't deter him from pushing it. And even at the end, where he could have been a little bit more conservative and let Charles pass him, he didn't. He went for it. He also saved me from getting close to 0 points this week on F1 Fantasy. So
hats off to Gasly. So Perez saved Dad's team and Gasly saved yours. Woot. My hero would have to be Vettel. I did not include this in the 3 statistical secrets. I mentioned it earlier. He has not finished lower than 4th at this race. And so for him to get on the podium, hats off to him. He did a good job. But I do have some consolation because I put his car on the thumbnail of the 3 statistical secrets. So the Seb secret sauce. That's what we were putting in the messages. Paola's like, what is the secret sauce? We need a meme. If any of you know how to make memes or draw, we need some Seb secret sauce stat. So Dominick, who is your 0?
As much as it really pains me to say this, I have to go with Norris. That in qualifier, there was a red flag and he did not respect it and it cost him grid penalty. And he laments that if he had been where he qualified, he could have probably maybe even won that race. It's what he lost for me that makes him the 0.
Dad, who is your 0?
I was really frustrated with Pirelli tires. It might not be their fault, but when Verstappen lost me all those points on my fantasy team, I had to blame someone. And I think Verstappen's a great driver. Maybe he drove a little too hard trying to get those fastest laps, and it had something to do with the tire failure. But at this point, until proven otherwise, 0 goes to Pirelli tires.
So Paola, who is your 0?
My 0 this week is Hamilton. He made a couple steps forward after practice on Friday, switching the rear wing, and then pretty much all steps backwards during the race and threw away his chance at being ahead of Verstappen by like double digits. I don't remember the last time I heard somebody leaving the brake switch on. Gotta feel pretty bad and honestly kind of embarrassing given his experience. Hoping that he does bounce back as he says every week.
True. Come back stronger. To comment about the magic button, this is something that's been on the radio a few different times throughout the seasons. It changes the brake bias so that you're able to allow the brakes to warm up the tires from the inside rather than the pavement. You know how the cars will like weave? That's usually what they do to warm up their tires. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but Hamilton does not hold his wheel like this at the beginning of a race. He takes the left hand and he covers the top left part of his wheel. And that's because it allows him to have more stability when he shifts up his gear. The problem is behind the wheel in the top left hand corner is the magic button. It's not a switch, it's a button. So apparently he held it like this. He was doing his switching. He must have accidentally pressed the button and it turned on his brake bias again. So if you know that Hamilton holds his steering wheel differently from everybody else at the beginning of a race, why do you have the button there? Shouldn't you move it somewhere else? Because I don't think you want to be upshifting and freezing up your brakes like that.
Switch or no switch, no excuse though. All he had to do was finish the race at a reasonable spot to get ahead of Verstappen and get a considerable lead. This was his chance to switch everything around, and he didn't.
That's a race reaction. It was a crazy race through and through. But now we have one news item we need to throw your way before we get into our ORC, our one race challenge. The Singapore Grand Prix, that amazing epic night race in Asia, has been canceled. Bro, I see your dejection. Tell us why. How do you feel?
I feel sad. That is a very beautiful race. Whether or not people think it's good for passing or just for spectacle, I just love the night race. And there's just something about seeing lights out. It's really something.
The vibe.
I almost forgot. Everyone, post in the comments below. It is Dad's birthday on June 10th. We want to wish you, Dad, a very happy birthday. How many years old will you be?
Old.
50s.
50s?
What did you say?
I said old man.
Old.
56 years young. Not
There you
old
go.
man. No.
56
This gray hair
years
doesn't mean
old.
anything.
It's his wisdom flowing out of him.
Power level.
His power level.
It's
Okay.
over 55.
It's over 55. Bro, you had a great idea. Just so everybody knows, we cannot publicly sing the happy birthday song. It is copyright by Warner Brothers. So we've come up with our own Pitwall happy birthday song. It is up, bro.
1, 2, 3. Vroom, vroom.
Zoom, zoom.
It's your birthday!
Vroom, vroom.
Zoom, zoom.
It's your birthday!
Burn them candles like they burn them tires. Yay.
Yay.
Thank
Well,
you.
I don't know if that's as much of a song as it's a word poem. Put in the comments below. Wish Dad a happy birthday. Yeah. Now to our one race challenge. Shout out to all of you that have been a part of our season-long Pitwall League. Here at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, our Pitwall League is in the large leagues, which means we have 50 or plus more teams, and we had third highest team average at 202.49 points per team. You guys did a really good job. Last video, I mentioned that we were pretty high up there in the season-long averages, and then a bunch of you joined. Good job. Thank you for joining, but it knocked our averages down. Dad, what was your strategy to bump up our league average?
I have 3 teams, and I decided to unjoin my 2 weakest teams so that our averages could get higher.
Hey, you got to do what works, right? Not saying you guys have to do it, because the point of the season-long league is to learn, to see from other drivers, the other teams, who are they picking, how are they performing, how are they costing. The fact that we were able to rebound in one race weekend, and now we're back up in the second at 1,090 points as a team average. Congratulations to all of you. You're doing really good. Now to our ORC, our one race challenge. We had the highest turnout with 32 teams. Congratulations to all of you. Dad, you got on the podium again, tying for second, 246 points. And we do want to give a shout out to our winner for this race, Amon Team 1, scoring 248 points. Here is his beautiful team. Now, Dad, you noticed that there was one inherent difference between his team and your team. Why did he end up scoring 2 more points to get first place?
He had a larger salary option, and he was able to afford Raikkonen, which gave him 2 more points than my Mick Schumacher gave me. I'm glad for him. He was able to afford a better driver than I was.
And that goes to show the benefit of increasing your value. He had 2 million more, and that's the difference he needed. Mick Schumacher got 15 points. Raikkonen got 17. Let's not leave out our second place team that tied you. He had Norris, Gasly, Schumacher, Verstappen, Perez, Turbo, and Red Bull. And did you have the exact same team? Verstappen,
Yep.
Norris, Perez, Turbo, Schumacher, Gasly, and Red Bull. You had a 102.8 value versus his 102.6. So that's probably what you need to be able to afford that good team, is around 102, 103 million. Just to clarify for everyone, there are 2 things that we do for the ORC challenge to make sure that it is fair and parity. The first is if you use a mega driver, which is fine, you can do that in your leagues, but we will remove the ×3 points from the mega driver. We'll just take your base score. And then the second, if there is a tie, for example, of second place, the lower team value gets a little bit higher on the step on the end podium. We put a cool podium at the end of this podcast video, and whoever's on the top step gets to hear their national anthem. We've heard a different national anthem every single race. So hats off to everyone who's been joining, and we be able to be exposed to all the beautiful countries and nationalities of those of you who are part of this global Formula One community. Our race for France, we've already put up the league code, and we'll put it in the description below. We already have 4 people join, which means that some of you have been paying attention to our Twitter account or our Google spreadsheet, because I put those league codes there. Of course, you can join through the link in the description below, paste that code in, and if we get at least 10 entrants, then I'm able to update our graphics for the cover and the avatar to be unique for this upcoming race. And now it's time to look at our ORC Elite. It's crazy to think that with 100 million or less, you can stand a chance against the super rich teams.
This is almost like a lottery. The lottery already knows the answers before you're guessing, and we're guessing and don't guess too well sometimes.
But this goes to show that even without 100 million, you could still score tons and tons of points. And there we have it. Thank you for joining us in this beautiful, amazing, epic Fantasy Formula One podcast. I've been your host, Jeanmark, and thank you, bro, for joining us. Thank you, Paola. And thank you, Dad. And until next time, we'll see you on the pit wall.